Hi friends, let's continue with our life processes. This is part 2. So again, question and answer. What are the three ways in which glucose is processed to give energy? See, the three ways are shown in this image. Again, remember this image is just taken from the soft copy of NCERT just for the convenience of students. But the copyright of all the images belongs to NCERT only. So like shown in the image, the glucose is processed in three ways. In the absence of oxygen, let's say for example in yeast, there is absence of oxygen. So this is called anaerobic, okay, method 1. Here the glucose first is converted to a compound called pyruvate, pyruvate, and then it is in the absence of oxygen, it is converted to ethanol, carbon dioxide and energy. Okay, this is the first method. Second method, when there is complete lack of oxygen, this is also anaerobic because there is no oxygen. Okay, this is the second anaerobic method. Here the pyruvate is converted to lactic acid and energy. Okay, this is usually seen in our muscle cells. Okay, and the third method is in presence of oxygen, and since oxygen is present, it is called aerobic. Okay, when oxygen is not present, it is anaerobic. When oxygen is present, it is aerobic. Okay, and when the oxygen is present, this pyruvate gives is processed to give carbon dioxide, water and energy. Okay, so these are the three methods. So first method is anaerobic process 1, where there is lack of oxygen. For example, in case of yeast, it gives ethanol, carbon dioxide and energy. Second method is anaerobic process number 2. Okay, here the lack of oxygen is complete. For example, in our muscle cells, it gives lactic acid and energy. And third process is aerobic process. Okay, in presence of oxygen. So whatever oxygen air you breathe in has oxygen, and it is transported by the blood and given to each of the cell. In the mitochondria of the cell, this oxygen reacts with glucose, right, to give you hydrogen, carbon dioxide and energy. Okay, these are the three methods in which glucose is processed. Note, glucose is first converted to pyruvate and energy, and then pyruvate is processed further. That is one thing we have to note. Glucose, okay, in the cell is first transformed to pyruvate plus some energy, and this pyruvate is further processed. Okay, and the energy released during aerobic process, that is when you breathe in the oxygen and the blood supplies oxygen to the cell, this is the aerobic process, gives you a lot greater energy than the anaerobic process. In presence of oxygen, the energy which is generated is much more than the anaerobic process. So the energy what is generated is converted to a molecule which is called as ATP. Okay, its name is ATP, and this ATP molecule will be used by cell for its actions like regeneration, growing, and all other energy needs of the cell. How do plants breathe? Okay, plants exchange gases through what the holes known as stomata. Okay, and the large intracellular spaces ensure that cells are in contact with the air. Okay, CO2 and O2 are exchanged by diffusion. Okay, so the plant exchange gases through the stomata holes, right? The holes called stomata, and the large intercellular spaces ensure that the cells are in contact with the air, and CO2 and O2 exchanged by diffusion through this stomata. During the day, CO2 is used for photosynthesis. How do aquatic animals like fishes breathe? Okay, the rate of breathing in aquatic organisms is much faster since they use dissolved O2 in water. See, the mammals and the birds use O2 available in the atmosphere, but the aquatic animals have limited O2. They have to use the O2 which is dissolved in water. Okay, the fishes take in water through their mouths, and force it past the gills where the dissolved O2 is taken up by the blood in the fish. Okay, so what happens? The fishes open their mouth and they absorb the water, they pull in, suck in the water, and they force it to pass through the gills, and from the gills it goes outside. Okay, when it passes through the gills, the oxygen dissolved in water is absorbed into the fish's blood. That's how aquatic animals breathe. How do humans breathe? Okay, the respiration system in humans is pretty complicated. Therefore, it is explained step by step with the image. Again, image is taken from soft copy of NCERT, but the copyright belongs to NCERT only. Okay, so what humans have are nasal passage, nose, and then the nose passage connects to pharynx, larynx, and rings of cartilage to go into lungs. Okay, in lungs, the pipes sort of subdivide like tree branches. Okay, the tubes which are carrying air divide into smaller tubes. They become bronchi and they become bronchioles. Okay, and finally they end up in balloon-like structures called alveoli. Alveoli. Okay, this alveoli is where the exchange of O2 and CO2 happens. Okay, so air is taken into the body through the nostrils. Air is filtered by fine hairs and mucus. See, the nose has fine hairs and it has mucus. These act as filtration systems for the air which is breathed in. From here, the air passes through the throat into the lungs. Okay, and there is rings of cartilage. So if you touch the bottom part of your throat, you'll be able to feel the rings of cartilage present in the throat, ensuring that this passage does not collapse. Okay, in the lungs, the passage divides into smaller and smaller tubes, finally terminating in balloon-like structures which are called alveoli, A-L-V-E-O-L-I. Okay, alveoli has extensive network of blood vessels on the surface, and the exchange of gases CO2 and O2 takes place. Okay, so what happens? So the blood which is containing carbon dioxide, which is dissolved in the blood, is pumped into the lungs, and inside the lungs, these due to diffusion, this CO2 comes out of the blood and goes into the lungs and it is breathed out. Okay, and the red blood corpuscles in the blood absorb the oxygen which is in the air. Okay, so from the nose air comes in, the air has oxygen, okay, which is absorbed by the blood's red blood corpuscles. Okay, and the CO2 dissolved in the blood is by diffusion sent back into the air in the lungs, and the lungs breathe out the CO2 rich air. Okay, so when we breathe in oxygen through the air, and when we breathe out, the CO2 which was in our body comes out mixed with air. Okay, so that's what we have said here. Blood brings CO2 from the rest of the body for release into alveoli. Okay, and the O2 in the air is taken up by the blood. Okay, hemoglobin present in red blood corpuscles has high affinity for O2 and absorbs it from the air that we breathe in. CO2 dissolved in the blood is released to the lungs and to the air in the lungs using diffusion, and that air which is now become CO2 rich is breathed out. So we breathe in air with oxygen and we breathe out air which is rich in carbon dioxide. What is the advantage over an aquatic organism does the terrestrial organism have with regard to obtaining the oxygen for respiration? See, the terrestrial organism has an advantage over the aquatic organism. What is it? Terrestrial organism can absorb abundant of O2 from the atmosphere, whereas the aquatic organism has less amount of O2 that it has to take from the dissolved O2 in water. Okay, hence the aquatic organism has to breathe greater number of times. How is oxygen and carbon dioxide transported in human beings? See, O2 is absorbed by hemoglobin present in red blood corpuscles in the blood when the blood passes through this alveoli. Okay, so remember they were small balloon-like structures, many of them, which are endpoints of the tubes inside the lungs, isn't it? So this alveoli have blood vessels, and the O2 is absorbed by hemoglobin present in red blood corpuscles in the blood. Okay, and this oxygen which is absorbed by hemoglobin is supplied to all the cells in the body. Okay, the CO2 which is dissolved in blood is released in alveoli and it is breathed out. Okay, how are lungs designed in human beings to maximize area for exchange of gases? See, in lungs, the passage divides into smaller and smaller tubes which finally terminate in balloon-like structures called alveoli. Okay, and these alveoli are many in number. Okay, there are a lot of alveoli at the ends of these small branches. Okay, so if you take all these alveoli and expand their surface, no, it is equal to 80 meters square. So that is a very large surface area. Okay, due to this large surface area, this maximizes the area for exchange of gases. What are the components of blood? Okay, blood consists of a fluid medium called plasma in which the cells are suspended. Plasma transports food, CO2 and nitrogenous waste in a dissolved form. Okay, so blood is mainly made up of a fluid called plasma in which the cells are suspended, and this plasma is responsible for transporting food, CO2 and nitrogenous waste. Okay, now the oxygen is carried by hemoglobin in red blood corpuscles. Okay, many other substances like salts are also transported by the blood. So these are the components of blood. What is the function of heart? We need a pumping organ to push blood around the body into a network of tubes called blood vessels to reach all the tissues and cells. Okay, the heart acts as this pump in the human body. So the function of heart is nothing but the function of pump which will pump the blood into the various cells of the human body. Describe the functioning of heart. Again, the functioning of heart is pretty complicated. So it is described with an image and step-by-step process. Okay. So these images are taken from NCERT and copyright of NCERT only. So you can see there is blood which is shown in red color and there is blood which is shown in purple color. Okay. The red color blood is oxygen rich because the blood from lungs which is rich in oxygen comes into the left part of the human heart known as the left atrium. That's where it lands up. Okay, so the heart has 4 chambers. Okay, 2 chambers are left chambers and 2 chambers are right chambers. Okay, so the left chamber, the top one is called the left atrium. The left chamber which is in the bottom is called the left ventricle. Okay, similarly in the right, okay, in the right the top chamber is called the right atrium. Okay, and the bottom chamber is called the right ventricle. Okay, so from lungs the oxygen rich blood which is shown in red color comes into the left top chamber which is left atrium. When the left atrium compresses, the oxygen rich blood flows into the bottom left chamber which is called the left ventricle. And when the left ventricle compresses, this blood is pushed into all the other cells of the body using blood vessels known as arteries. A-R-T-R-I-E-S. The main artery being the aorta. A-O-R-T-A. You can see the aorta in the image. You can see the red oxygen rich blood going to the body, and you can see arteries which are supplying oxygen rich blood to every cells in the body. Now what will the cells do? The cells will absorb the oxygen. They will you will have a reaction with the food which is present in the blood which has been absorbed by the cell. So the oxygen and the food, like the glucose, will react with each other, and the byproduct will be energy. Okay, this energy is used by body for various purposes, for movement, for repairing dead cells, etc., etc., right? Or for growing new cells, or for in a growing human being, all that the energy is used. Now the byproduct is carbon dioxide. Okay, this carbon dioxide dissolves in the blood and it becomes purple. You can see at the bottom of the image purple blood. Okay, this purple blood is flowing back to the heart through blood vessels which are known as veins, veins. Okay, and they land up in the right upper chamber of the heart known as the right atrium. Okay, when the right atrium compresses, the blood is pushed into the lower right chamber known as the right ventricle, and when the right ventricle compresses, okay, through pulmonary arteries, these carbon dioxide blood, you can see at the top of the image, the purple will go into the lungs. Okay, and this carbon dioxide is released back into the air by diffusion in lungs, and oxygen is absorbed, and the same cycle continues. Okay, so you can see the heart diagram in detail here. You can see the left atrium at the top left. Okay, and you can see from pulmonary veins oxygen rich blood will come in here, and when that gets compressed, it is pushed into left ventricle, and when the left ventricle, when it compresses, it is the oxygen rich blood is pumped into the main artery called the aorta, aorta. Okay, which is goes into all parts of the body, and that part of the blood becomes carbon dioxide rich, which is collected back in the right atrium. You can see top right atrium is there. Okay, here all the blood which is carbon dioxide rich is collected. When right atrium compresses, the blood is pushed into right ventricle, and when right ventricle compresses, the blood is pushed into pulmonary arteries which take it to the lungs. Carbon dioxide rich blood is taken to the lungs, carbon dioxide is released, oxygen is absorbed, and again that oxygen rich blood comes back to the pulmonary, through pulmonary veins, it comes back to left atrium, and the cycle continues. Okay, so just we'll read out the text. O2 rich blood from lungs come into left atrium via pulmonary veins as the left atrium expands. Okay, O2 rich blood from left atrium is pushed into left ventricle. Left ventricle is nothing but the left part which is at the bottom, the 4 chambers. This is the second chamber which is at the left part of the heart, and it is at the bottom, left ventricle, as left atrium contracts and left ventricle expands. Okay, then oxygen rich blood from the muscular left ventricle gets pumped out to various cells in the body via aorta and arteries as the left ventricle contracts. Okay, O2 in the blood is used by the cells for energy, and the byproduct CO2 gets dissolved in the blood. Okay, now CO2 rich blood shown in blue color or purple color flows in the veins which combine to form vena cava, which is a main vein, and finally flows into the right atrium as it expands. Right atrium contracts and the blood is pushed into right ventricle. Okay, this is the 4th chamber, right? First chamber is left atrium, second chamber is left ventricle, third chamber is right atrium, and fourth chamber is right ventricle. So when right atrium gets the carbon dioxide rich blood and it contracts, the carbon dioxide rich blood is pushed into the right ventricle which expands. Okay, right ventricle contracts and blood is pushed into lungs via pulmonary arteries for oxygenation. Okay, so CO2 rich blood is pumped into lungs. There the exchange of gases happen and it becomes oxygen rich, and it is pumped back into it is brought back to the heart. Okay, and this cycle continues. Note the ventricles, that is the bottom chambers, that is the left ventricle and right ventricle, have thicker walls than the atriums, as they have to pump blood into various organs. See, the atriums will just pump blood into their downward chambers. Left atrium will pump it into left ventricle, and right atrium will pump it into right ventricle. But the ventricles, left and right, have to pump the blood into the organs. The right ventricle will pump the blood into the lungs, whereas the left atrium will pump the blood into aorta and to all parts of the body. So their walls have to be thicker and stronger. Note that the valves ensure that the blood does not flow backwards. So if you look at the second image, there is a valve between the right ventricle and the pulmonary arteries. Okay, and there are valves between right atrium and the right ventricle. There are some valves which are between the left ventricle and the aorta. Okay, and all these valves, okay, ensure that the blood flow happens in the desired direction and not in the opposite direction. Okay. What is blood pressure? The force that the blood exerts against the wall of a vessel, the artery, is called blood pressure. Pressure of the blood during ventricle contraction, right? When the left ventricle contracts, it pushes the blood into aorta and the arteries, and due to this there will be a pressure called systolic pressure. The normal pressure of systolic pressure in human beings is 120 millimeter of mercury, 120 mm of Hg. The pressure of the blood during ventricle relaxation, see the left ventricle, which contracts and expands when the heart is pumping blood, right? When it contracts, the pressure is high because the blood has to be pushed to various cells in the body. When it relaxes, the pressure is not so much. That is called diastolic pressure. Okay, it is 80 millimeter of mercury, 80 mm of Hg. Blood pressure is measured with sphygmomanometer. Sphig, S-P-H-Y-G, mo, M-O, mano, M-A-N-O, meter, M-E-T-E-R. Sphygmomanometer. That's the device used to measure the blood pressure. What is high BP? High blood pressure or hypertension is caused by constriction of arteries or arterioles. Okay, so when the heart pumps the blood from the left ventricle into aorta and into arteries, if there is a constriction because of any kind of fat getting accumulated in the arteries, if there is a constriction in these arteries or arterioles, this increases the resistance to blood flow. Okay, and therefore the heart will have to work harder to pump the blood. Okay, that's why we get high blood pressure or high BP. Describe various types of blood vessels. Arteries carry blood from heart to the cells of the body. They have thick elastic walls. Okay, these are the blood vessels which carry blood from heart to cells. The veins transport the blood in the opposite direction. Okay, from cells to the heart. Okay, they have valves to ensure direction of blood flow. Inside an organ and tissue, the artery divides into smaller and smaller vessels to bring in the blood in contact with all individual cells. Okay, they have walls which are just one cell thick called capillaries. So the arteries become smaller and smaller vessels, and finally they become capillaries. Okay, which have wall which are just one cell thick. Okay, these are the walls through which the exchange of materials happen between cells and the blood. Exchange of materials between blood and cells happen here. Capillaries join to form veins which take the blood back to the heart. Okay, this is the blood vessels we have. What are platelets? When an injury happens, blood vessels are damaged and the blood platelet cells which circulate around the body are responsible for plugging these leaks by helping to clot the blood at the points of injury to stop bleeding. Okay, so whenever an injury happens, right, the blood starts spilling out. Okay, now body cannot afford to lose lot of blood, so there are platelets which are in the blood which help the blood near the injury to clot and stop the bleeding. Okay, thus those part of the blood is called platelets. What is lymph? Lymph is a fluid in blood like plasma itself that carries digested and absorbed fat from the intestine and drains the excess fluid and extracellular space back into the blood. Okay, lymph is nothing but a part of the blood. It's a fluid which carries fat from the intestine. Describe the transportation in plants. Okay, again this transportation in plants is little complicated. It is explained in steps with an image. You can see in the image the water and the minerals are getting pulled by the roots and getting pushed up to the various branches and to the various leaves, and from the leaves it is also getting evaporated. So that image is again taken from NCERT, copyright of NCERT only. Transportation in plants happens using independently organized conducting tubes. Okay, so the water and minerals and other products flow through independently organized conducting tubes. One such set of tubes is known as xylem, XYLEM. The another set is known as phloem, PHLOEM, phloem. Okay, now the root cells, okay, absorb ions from the soil, creating an ion concentration difference. The water from the soil moves into root cells to balance this difference. Okay, and this water is pushed upwards by xylem. Xylem is responsible for water and mineral transportation. Okay, so what happens is there is ions in the soil which are absorbed by the roots. So there is a difference in ion concentration where the concentration is more in the roots. Because of this, water from the soil sort of moves towards the roots and gets absorbed by the roots to balance this concentration difference. And this water which gets absorbed by the roots is pushed upward by the xylem. Okay, and also evaporation of water molecules from the cells of a leaf. Okay, so there is evaporation of water molecules from the cells of a leaf called transpiration, and this creates a suction effect which pulls water from the cells of the root and distributes to all part of the tree. Okay, so there are two reasons why the water moves up the tree. One reason is ion concentration, which is different in the roots. The water will come in to balance this difference, and it gets pushed up by the xylem. Second reason is the evaporation of water happens from the leaves of the tree, and this creates a suction effect, because once the water evaporates, to fulfill that gap, water again flows up. Okay, so this is why we have water moving up the tree. Okay, the another point is phloem transports products of photosynthesis, okay, from leaves where they are synthesized to other part of the plants, called translocation. Okay, the process of water moving up is called transpiration, and the process of food moving from the leaves where due to photosynthesis they are created to other parts of the plants is known as translocation. Okay, the storage organs of the roots, fruits and seeds and growing organs of the plants, all this needs the food and the energy that is generated using photosynthesis. Okay, this is achieved by utilizing energy from photosynthesis. The flow of food and the energy created by photosynthesis happens through phloem to various parts of the tree using the energy generated during photosynthesis. This is called translocation. Okay, what are the components of transport system in human beings? What are the function of these components? Okay, this transport system in human beings has the following parts. One is the heart, second is the blood, and third is the blood vessels. These are the parts of the transportation system. The heart acts as a pump that circulates blood to all other cells in the body parts, including small intestine for absorbing digested food, and to the lungs for absorbing oxygen and release of carbon dioxide. The blood acts as a medium that transports digested food, oxygen and carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide dissolves in blood and O2 is absorbed by red blood corpuscles, and the food is transported mainly via plasma in blood. Okay, and the blood flows in blood vessels known as arteries from the heart to all cells. Okay, and they become very small capillaries to exchange the materials with the other cells, and they group back to form veins where the blood is taken back to the heart. At cellular level, the blood vessels break down into capillary to supply materials to the cell. Okay, so these are the components of the transport system in the human being: the heart, the blood, and the blood vessels. Why is it necessary to separate oxygenated and deoxygenated blood in mammals and birds? See, the mammals and birds have lungs where oxygen is absorbed and CO2 is released, okay, from the blood. The blood which circulates O2 and CO2 flows in different blood vessels to and from the lungs. Okay, so remember, in human beings we have pulmonary arteries which carry oxygen, the carbon dioxide rich blood to lungs, and pulmonary veins which carry the oxygen rich blood from lungs to heart. Okay, so there are two different blood vessels. Similarly, heart pumps oxygen rich blood to all the cells, and CO2 rich blood from different cells is brought back to the heart through different blood vessels called arteries and veins. Due to this, oxygen and deoxygenated blood are kept separate. What are the components of transport system in highly organized plants? In plants, transport system consists of independently organized connecting tubes. Okay, one such set is known as xylem, which is responsible for transportation of water and minerals from the soil to all parts of the plant. Okay, second set known as phloem, PHLOEM, is responsible for transportation of products of energy created by photosynthesis, products and energy created by photosynthesis, that is food, quote unquote food, and energy created by photosynthesis to various parts of the plants such as fruits, seeds, and growing parts. How are water and minerals transported in plants? Water and minerals are absorbed by roots and pushed up via xylem. Also, evaporation of water from plants' leaf cells create a suction force for water to move up the plant via xylem. Okay, so when the water evaporates from the leaves, there is less water there. The concentration is less, and the concentration of water near the roots and the stem is more. So the water naturally flows from the root and the stem to the leaves. Okay, this is called the suction action. How is food transported in plants? Food and energy are generated in plants in leaves during photosynthesis, and it is transported to other parts of plants via phloem, PHLOEM, which is set of connected tubes. Energy in form of ATP is used to move the food to various parts of the plant. See, when you create energy during photosynthesis, that energy is converted to ATP molecule. This ATP molecule is used as energy by various cells to move the food to the required part of the plant.